Welcome to If the Walls Could Talk in Buffalo podcast with Don Purdy, former member of the Buffalo Bills front office, 27 years, and Josh Cormier, a member of the coaching staff under the Wade Phillips regime. And we are here, as always, to talk with you about the Buffalo Bills of 1990 and, of course, 2022.
Okay, we are recording. Don, how you doing?
I'm okay. We should probably get right to the issue of the day.
Yeah, the main loss for the viewers and the city and the public is the lack of the Bruce Smith jersey.
Well, that I was talking about. I see that Scott Rowland was elected into Baseball Hall of Fame today.
I felt like, is he a Hall of Famer?
I feel like I'm missing something, but I would say if you looked at his stats, obviously we talked to Vic Carucci about how serious at least they take that in the NFL. Yeah. Like he didn't like anything about Hall of Great. Okay, I'm
Hall of Very Good.
Scott
Rowland feels like the Hall. Is he in the same class as Babe Ruth? I mean, I guess that's just how you put it. If you're me, that's how you think about it. I saw the thing on the bottom line last night. I'm like, Scott Rowland?
I know, I did too. And it was the only one?
Yeah. It's underwhelming. Cooperstown might not be that busy that weekend.
Yeah, I'm stalling here, clearly. I'm avoiding the elephant in the room. Let's do it. So starting up with where your jersey
I'm wearing
is.
Black.
Yeah.
I'm wearing black.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah, so I'm wearing black in honor of the loss of the Bruce Smith jersey that I had worn every day, every podcast since the Minnesota game.
It was brave, and you weren't wrong about the regular season.
No,
but,
and you got to take a stand every once in a while in the stands, and I appreciated the fact that I did not get on Old Takes Exposed again after the game. I was frankly worried during the fourth quarter of the game that my Twitter feed was going to start blowing up as it did after the Minnesota game. Being on there, so I was grateful, and in at least that way that I avoided, going Twitter famous again for my promise. I got to tell you, like a couple days out now, and looking back at the weekend and the week last week, kind of could see it coming.
Well, yeah, I mean, we knew we were going to do a show today. I didn't really expect we'd be doing this show.
No, I guess what I'm asking is, like, with hindsight, it's probably not all that surprising that they did not put their best foot forward.
Let me ask you this. You've been in the film rooms, and there's no precedent for this, obviously, as with the DeMar Hamlin situation, the game. That game, I know people didn't want to talk about it, but the game that he got hurt, the Bengals marched right down the field on that drive they scored. They were on their second drive, and they were moving it again with apparent ease. I don't know how much could have been taken from that to prepare for them a second time. And it was probably hard to watch that film knowing what was about to happen.
Yeah.
But, I don't think you burn the film. I don't even know. I'm just, you've seen, I don't know what.
Right. I'm sure they probably watched, all of the plays other than the play. My main takeaway from that was, I don't think it's a coincidence that they played their worst game of the season against that specific team.
Are you suggesting about all the intangibles, or just that?
I think probably a lot of them probably have some PTSD from what happened. I think just seeing those same faces and the same opponents probably wasn't a help. I think the Bengals had some intrinsic motivation that we kind of slept on. They played that whole us against the world, and the NFL's against them, and they felt like they got kind of screwed in the compromise with the neutral site game and the selling tickets in Atlanta, and it seemed like they were able to channel the emotion from what happened on that Monday night for them into a positive, and the Bills, I think, just kind of ran out of the ability to channel that in a positive way.
I agree. I mean, the Chiefs got thrown the bye.
Yep.
The Bills got thrown the opportunity to play the championship game in a neutral site.
And this game was here.
And
frankly, when this first happened, I felt like if the Bills and the Bengals met in the second round, it felt like to me that the fairest solution would be neutral site.
Yeah, the Bengals got nothing out of the deal, so there wasn't us against the world type of thing. I don't know what the win. I know they have win probabilities for in game.
Yeah,
but the number one seed probability before the Bills played the Bengals, I almost we talked about the three-headed monster. Like, was it 33, 33, 34?
Yeah.
I don't know what it was.
The Bills were 50%.
50. Okay, wow.
So they lost a lot that night. And just, I guess, to my initial question, when you step back from it a few days, and a week, and like, I feel like this was foreseeable, not inevitable, but foreseeable, that they just couldn't rise to the occasion again in every single way, whether it's the game plan, whether it's the decision-making process in game, whether it's the emotion, whether it's the physicality, whether it's, mental errors, physical errors. Like, it just felt flat in the stadium.
Yeah, right. You were there.
It felt flat. It felt flat even before the game. It felt off. And I felt not as emotional and not as into and my feelings don't equate to the field, but it just I got the sense that it had been so much for so long at a 10 out of 10 on the heightened scale that it was almost impossible to continue to sustain that level of, emotion and preparation and all that. And the Bengals were able to they're going up in the emotional peak wave, and the Bills are coming down. They're coming down from it. How could you not come down from all of the emotion of the last month?
You're right. And let's just say you could take the Damar Hamlin, what happened to him, out completely. You would still look back on this Bills season and say they dealt with a lot.
Yeah. It would have been I texted this to my buddy the other day. It would have been the greatest season in NFL history if they would have won the Super Bowl. So to me, it feels difficult to really be angry at them for not completing that.
Agreed.
You can be disappointed, sad, all of those things, of course, 100% valid. But to be angry that they did not complete what I believe would be the greatest season in NFL history if they would have won the Super Bowl, that's a tough bar. There's a reason why it would have been the greatest for 30 for 30 or the greatest NFL films doc, because it was that daunting.
Yeah, and again, just they spent Christmas Eve night
in Chicago.
Yep. You almost forget that. It seems like nothing compared to. But in talking to the players from the 1990 team that we spoke to, all the great guests we have, and then we talked to Jeremy Kelly, the alumni director at the Bills, and I think this Bills team, the 2022 Bills team, yes, they wanted to win it for themselves, but they also kind of felt like they, from what I understand, what I heard, they wanted to win it, yes, for the community that supported them so much. They wanted to win it for the guys that didn't win it, and so there was a lot on their backs, and you almost might think, Josh, that, okay, the New England game, you had the two, that was the first game after Damar Hamlin. You had the two kickoff returns, and then you had the hot start versus Miami. And then
you ran out of gas.
Like the Miami, but Miami was playing a third-string quarterback, no starting running back. You got away with it, but you just couldn't get away with it against this hot, good Cincinnati team that was in the Super Bowl last year. The one thing it did do, I felt better about, weirdly, as I was walking out of the stadium, I felt better about 13 seconds. You felt better about it?
In one sense, because I had always taken, not for granted, but I had always kind of assumed that the Bills would have beat the Bengals last year in the AFC Championship game.
Oh, yeah.
It's the USA-Finland game.
Right.
Like,
right.
I walked out of that stadium and I thought to myself, the Bills and the Bengals are not much materially different than they were last year. Von Miller didn't play in this game. So the Bills, I feel like the Bills at the end of the playoffs last year were better than they are now, but so were the Bengals.
Yeah.
I feel like everybody had just assumed, oh man, if they would have just kept the lead against the Chiefs, they would have beat the Bengals at home and gone to the Super Bowl. I'm not so sure. I mean, this is now 5 quarters of football where the Bengals dominated the Bills.
Yeah.
5 quarters.
Yeah. So looking ahead in that vein, do you feel like what would further make you feel better is if the Bengals just went all the way?
It would have until I saw Eli Apple's tweet.
That was unfortunate.
He's a piece of work.
That was unfortunate.
His resume of fan interaction and other player interaction is rough. It's rough. I guess if I had to pick a team for the fans of Cincinnati who even the fans at the game, I felt like were respectful, and there were quite a few. There was a few thousand Bengal fans. Like, it was noticeable. You could hear,
like,
and they were down low,
Yeah.
like behind their sideline. I'll almost always root for the team that's never won, and the city that's never won. And Cincinnati, the Reds won in 1990.
Yeah,
and then in the 70s.
But
it's been a long time for Cincinnati,
right.
and I feel like they were in the wilderness along with the Bills for a long time. I don't know.
Did you root for after the Red Sox had won it? Then did you root for the Cubs?
I wanted the Cubs to win.
Yeah. Okay.
Although the tough thing about that one was it was the Cubs and the Indians.
Oh, that's right.
And the Indians it had been 60 years in Cleveland and all that. So and that was that was after the Cavs won it. Yeah, I want the Cubs to win. So I'm going to almost always root for the team that hasn't won. Yeah. I'm not like you who cheers for the Casino or the Yankees. I don't roll like that. Don rolls like that. I don't roll. I don't cheer for IBM.
I think the first time that you came to this place where we do the podcast and you saw some Yankees, I thought you were going to pass out.
Well, I wasn't surprised. I guess just disappointed. I'm more disappointed. It was almost like my reaction to the game. I'm not surprised. But just kind of, I'm sad for you.
I told you.
I know why.
I knew you had your New Hampshire family connection, which I learned more about. I had my New Jersey family connection, and yes, I could have rooted for the Mets, but they had Yankee tickets.
That would have been easy. It wouldn't have been easy to root for the Mets. You listen, cheering for the Casino, it happens. There's nothing wrong with that. So I after the game tried to do like a 24-hour news blackout and just not listen to anything. But something kind of caught my attention, and I wanted to bring it up to you, and then maybe, we could tell people kind of what our plan going forward is, for the show and for some content, just kind of at a basic level. So I noticed, I think it was the next morning that the Bills signed like 13 guys to the reserve futures list. Yeah. Two things struck me. Man, the wheels of the NFL just never stop, right? Like they were. So that was obviously ready to go before. And then maybe you could explain to me what the reserve futures list is. Like, how is that different than like a regular free agent signing?
Yeah, they only have, I think, 1 year or less of accrued or accredited seasons. So they are kind of restricted free agents, but you have even more. You don't want them. If you cut them, they hit the market. But it's almost assume that you want to keep those guys. Again, you have 53 players for the regular season, but you bring 90 to camp.
Right.
So if there were a pool of 20 such guys and they chose 13 to lock up to come to the another, I think it's a 1 or 2 year deal at the league minimum.
And what's the advantage for the player rather than just going to free agency and maybe picking which camp you might want to go to?
It's a bird in the hand. You're going to have a chance to, and the team has the upper hand for sure.
So they get no money.
No,
probably no signing bonus.
No signing bonus.
Zero signing bonus.
Nothing.
Okay.
No,
so I guess the other part of that question is then there are guys in the front office who are not focusing on during the playoff run. They're already on to next year, right? Like, so at what point? Okay. Brandon Beane, who's the assistant GM,
is it?
It was Joe Shane, but
Shane,
he went.
Okay, the Giants.
How many guys in the front office? How many guys in the front office are not focused on this year's team?
How many guys in the front this year? Meaning that
the on season game to game, like the playoff run. How many guys are already looking ahead? Doing the reserve future contracts or
there's nothing that's mutually exclusive about what they do except for like the scouts. The scouts are on the road looking. Really, all they care about is next year's team and finding the right prospects, and they get invited back for 1 weekend a year usually. So they all go to dinner. The team puts them up in a hotel. They see each other. They see the players that they drafted if they did. But the front office personnel decision makers, they have to wear multiple hats. Well, 2 at least, where they have to continue to monitor the current team. You always again have to assume that on a Sunday or a game day, every player is going to get injured.
Right.
So
right.
when that player, the 2 or 3 that do that you have to replace at least maybe for a few weeks, that who the best available candidates are that are available out there around the league. So you're doing that. But yeah, you have to have a conversation about, hey, if our season ends this weekend, we'll kind of have to assume it will. On Monday, are we going to assign those reserve future players?
So that's kind of the first.
Which ones are they?
That's the first step after the season ends, right? Like for the GM.
It was. Okay. Yeah, Kevin Meegank would be involved in that. Jim Overdorf was still where. Yeah, you're going to say you have to have a contract ready. It's a very basic contract.
Sure.
Like
well, yeah, if you're getting no money.
No money.
Yeah. Sounds like my first 2 contracts with the Bills. No money, 80 hours a week. Yeah, where do I sign?
And the funny part is for these guys, they're going to be gone until the offseason workout program starts probably the first week of April.
Right.
So,
that's that would be a benefit for these guys, right? They could get linked up with the offseason program. They all be invited.
You do get paid for that too.
Okay.
It's not a lot.
A stipend.
It's a stipend. Yeah.
Now, would the team put them up somewhere, or do they have to pay for their own lodging?
Pay for their own lodging.
Really?
Yeah.
Oof, you don't even get one of those apartments.
So that's where the agents kind of sometimes have to help, because the money they're making, honestly, it's not even doesn't even pay rent. Like they hopefully the advantages for them, they were at least either on the practice squad the previous year or saw some game action. So if they had a good agent and people around them, they should have known to bank as much of that as they could.
Sure.
Which is
it's almost like interning.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
And it's not like you're going to go pick up a job, 30 hours a week somewhere else in the meantime to supplement your income, because you got to be in NFL shape and working out, and then you got to come here a number of times. And if you're in the off-season program, I guess the one benefit that I found out is you can eat. You can eat well.
Yeah.
I was never hungry. Even when I interned, I was never hungry.
Yeah, they call it Hell's Kitchen. It's not in the cafeteria. It's down in the bunker of the field house. There's this makeshift kitchen.
Oh yeah, I ate back there.
Yeah. And it's just,
wow, that's so funny. I haven't thought of that. It was in the back.
Yeah, I remember,
and it was a kid. Wow, and there was a folding table back there. Wow, that's right.
It's not pizza and wings.
No. And Rusty Jones, God love him, put me on a meal plan to drop some weight, which I did very quickly.
Yeah, impressively.
And he I went back to the first time, and I remember the plate was big and the portion was not, and I'm like, oh man. And Joe Pendry walked past me, and I'll never forget this, and I'm like, this is it? He's like, you don't need any more than that, fat boy. I'm like, okay, welcome to the NFL.
Exactly.
They
kind of talk.
Yeah, that's right. The back of the field house was this makeshift kitchen where they just threw some stuff together on, the non-game days, or when it was the B crew in there, me and all them. How funny. Okay, so we go from there, and then maybe just kind of walk us through what, the week looks like. What did the week look like for you after the season ended?
So, I was, as part of the front office and in football administration, I'd have to turn the page, in the immortal words of Bob Seger too. And like you said, you had to, and there were things that I was doing all along. But usually the first thing I would do is, there were a lot of players that needed surgery, but could play through an injury during the season. Perfect example would be
Jordan Phillips just announced that he had torn his labrum.
Okay.
And he's going to have shoulder surgery.
Okay, shoulder surgery, meniscus surgery, stuff you could play through. And the big one was groin surgery. We usually had 3 or 4 guys that needed groin surgery.
Not the Ronnie Jones kind of groin surgery.
No.
Okay, just to be clear. Okay.
Yeah,
it was a different kind of groin surgery.
Groin/hernia surgery.
Okay,
so there's a hospital in Philadelphia called Hanneman Hospital, and
they're known for groin surgery
and hernia surgery. Yeah, it's all kind of in that general area. But
I learned something new today.
Yeah, and we would send players there. Usually, a trainer like Greg McMillan would go with those guys and be with them for a couple days. And in Philadelphia, that'd be tough right now, because Philadelphia's in Super Bowl mania right now.
Now, does that hospital do it for all the teams?
I heard that they do it for a lot of the teams.
So do you have a parade of NFL guys coming in there in the off season to get hernia surgery?
I believe so.
That's funny. It's interesting.
Kind of like Dr.
Andrews,
James
right?
Andrews
Okay.
in Colorado was such the guy for the knee that he was so trusted. But so I would prepare to pay for that surgery.
Okay.
Make the claim. Those are like the immediate things because they wanted to do that literally like on the next day.
Sure. And because they played through, and this was all known internally, right? Like the team knew, hey, this is coming. This guy's playing with this injury.
Yep.
As soon as the season's over, he's got to go under the knife.
Yeah, guys like Jarris Bird did a lot of. Usually, it's a couple guys a year.
Was there one that stood out to you as like, wow, I can't believe he played through that?
I mean, to me, all the guys. I fortunately had never had that particular injury. My wife did, and it's hard to imagine.
Which injury did she have?
Hernia.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't mean to.
Okay. Yeah. Well, she's your wife. That's what
right.
Just wanted to be clear there. We're getting in a little bit of a gray area. So
no, she had that. She freaked out over the surgery too. Oh my gosh! But she went through with it like a trooper.
So guys would play through all different various types. What would you say? Maybe 5 to 10% of the guys at the end of the season would have to get some type of surgery. Is that fair?
That's probably a pretty good assessment. Yeah. And then then you have the rehab after that. You don't just get right back on the bike or whatever. You have to come back slowly from that. So then you come back. Those guys come back with the team trainers, not the strength and conditioning. The training room. This is probably different since when you were last there. The training room off the side of it is a mini weight room.
Okay.
And it's got like if the main weight room has 12 treadmills and all, leg lifts and all, the training room has like 1 or 2.
Okay. Yep.
And it's for the strength and conditioning coaches want to get their hands on these guys and see improvement. But if they're still in rehab, like if you let them out in the wild,
they might overdo it.
They don't. If they assume, okay, if you're in this room, you have no restrictions,
right?
So the trainers keep them in their own training room, weight room under their supervision.
Sure.
And they'll say, when we're ready to release you to the other room, we will. And believe me, they're not going to hold back.
Yeah. Because when I was there, the guys in the main weight room weren't supervised closely. Like Rusty and those guys were there, but they weren't like watching over every rep, which I'm assuming if a guy's rehabbing, somebody's watching every rep,
every single rep and charting it and making sure you're starting light and working back up to it. So until April when the offseason workout starts, and I can't believe we're talking about this week, but then Rusty and his crew are very much involved, and Rusty and Eric Ciano now. Eric's a good guy. He's been there for a few regimes. I'm glad he's been able to still be there.
So this is kind of an interesting question to me. So when the Bills were good, you were lower in the total.
Yeah.
When the Bills weren't as good, you were more involved.
Yeah.
Can you kind of describe to me the difference in the building when they lost in the building, the staff, the coaches, whatever, when they lost the Super Bowl, when they lost the playoff game, as opposed to a season that you knew was coming to an end, after the last regular season game?
Well, I think fortunately for me, because of that, because I had more responsibilities, it was a welcome, necessary diversion from not having a lot to do and just dwelling on things and like wringing your hands and oh my gosh, and then you have to watch the other playoff games that are happening. We should have been there. So at least when I have, and we had to get into budgeting and things like that. Believe it or not every NFL team, at least, with the Bills, you just spend whatever you want on whatever you want.
Right.
Like the ownership wants to know. It's more of a projection. What do you expect to spend on it? So this is the time of year where, the trainers might have been looking at getting some new rehab machines. The strength and conditioning coaches have been wanting to get their hands on some new toys.
Sure.
Toys that are $40,000-$50,000 machines.
What do you remember like a ridiculous request that was told no, either by when it was Ralph Wilson or when it was the Pagulas?
So when I was there, I did do budgets when the Pagulas were there, but they had their own. Like Dave Wheat would kind of be the catch-all for that. And he did a great job of understanding the needs that people said they had, and also trying to be a guardian of the money and relaying things. And
because it can go quick.
Yeah.
So
if he were an advocate for you, that was good. So I was kind of more on his side. I was more the person that, for the football side, I would do the trainer's budget, I would do the scouting budget, the coaches.
Yep.
The coaches didn't have a whole lot new that they needed to do. But
was there one silly thing that you remember?
There were times when,
or not even just silly, but like crazy expensive.
Oh yeah, the video department would. Yeah, and we talked to Henry Kuhn too, but all the machines they wanted to upgrade. They wanted everything. And in the tech world, the new machines were $500,000 and crazy amounts. I mean, literally, we just went into installment plans to buy them.
Really?
But it didn't always get approved right away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'd say let's maybe hold off on that one until next year. But budgeting is something that I would also have to start doing.
That sounds very exciting.
No, it wasn't. It was not.
So
it was not exciting, but it was part of what you did.
How long after a bad season ending? So not one of the 6 and 10 years, but like Super Bowl years or the Pittsburgh 04 year when they should have made the playoffs. That's the closest thing you probably experienced to a playoff loss, because it really kind of was a playoff.
Went to the last day of the season.
How long until the building is back to normal?
You know what? During the season, we had the privilege of being fed in the cafeteria.
Yeah,
and it was kind of a time where you knew you were going to see, like high school or college, whatever it is. Like you knew you were going to be in line for food. You sit down with different people, and that was a part of the day where at least for 30 to 45 minutes, maybe you caught up with colleagues. Otherwise, you had to seek them out. So you get a better gauge about how people are feeling, but that all went away in the offseason.
Sure.
There was no more, the cafeteria closed down. Everything just felt different. It felt like the offseason, the shadow of it just came down hard. Like you walk by the cafeteria, it's dark. You can always get water.
Right. And the players aren't there.
They're gone too.
Right.
Yeah.
It feels like college when there are no students.
Very, very close to. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's what it felt like to me. It felt like a school with no students.
Yeah, the buzz is gone, and so it's just it feels bad.
Weeks,
it feels really bad. Weeks is probably right.
A few weeks.
Yeah,
and especially because the season always ends in the winter here, so it's also the weather sucks,
and other teams are still playing.
Yeah,
the Super Bowl is bittersweet. It's fun as a football fan to watch, but you're so much more than a fan. You have so much riding on what your own team does that you feel some relief after the Super Bowl, regardless of what happens. Just that, hey, no one else is playing either.
Right.
But then, and we'll get into this in future episodes. You and I were talking last night. I also was part of. It was the one time a year where I was brought into the fold as being part of some of the decision making, only from the salary cap point.
Is that where is this the time of the year that you sank the career of the former 4th overall pick from Texas who played tackle? Okay. That was okay. Just to tie back to an old story. So yeah,
we'll get into this.
We're real excited that you have a unique perspective on the offseason that a lot of people don't know about, that don't. Not that you don't understand, but it's secretive, like the games on the field speak for themselves, and everybody, watches them and has opinions and has, some knowledge of that, but it's a whole different world, behind the scenes and, the salary cap and all the maneuvering going forward. All right. Let me ask you a general question about that. Brandon Beane's press conference yesterday.
I caught part of it.
How much of it do you think is just in general, those guys, smoke show as opposed to real talk? Because he said last year they weren't going to make any big splashes, and then they go out and sign Von Miller. Obviously, when you were there, was there one line for the press and the media, and then another line internally?
There is, yeah. I mean, there is. There are things you're ready to share. What we have to understand is when you're sharing it with the media, you're essentially sharing it with the 31 other teams.
Right. Right.
So, and fans and the media gets frustrated because they don't think that they're saying anything. But you do have to keep things close to the hip. I mean, when we went to sign Mario Williams, I only found out about it a few weeks before, and I was going to be part of, how are we going to execute this free agency and make sure we get him. But, if the team would have come out 2 months earlier and say, we're going to go after Mario Williams this year, well, all of a sudden, any other teams that are thinking, hey, we're going to have a bidding war, we already know some, you know what I mean?
Were there a lot of talks about the message to the media? Like, do you remember, like, did they, when obviously you didn't work with Brandon Beane specifically, but former guys, was it, hey, let's sit down and figure out what we're going to say to the media? Or is it more just kind of off the cuff and then, figure it out from there?
It was kind of the opposite in terms of there was an assumption. It wasn't necessary for the last GM I worked with was Doug Whaley. Like when he would talk with us, he wouldn't specifically say, hey guys, I'm going to tell the media this, but really we're doing this. We just assumed he was going to keep things close to the vest. And then when he did go in a press conference and say something that we're like, ooh, I'm not sure. I expected him to reveal that.
Sure.
It's almost like you assume you're surprised when something is revealed that, first of all, it's going to create a buzz amongst the fans and the media, but it also might, and Doug was good. But there were a couple times where I remember, and he just happened to be the last GM I worked with, that he would say things that we were like, "Ooh, that might." There's a cleanup on aisle 3 here,
right? Either too much information, or wrong information is kind of unimportant, right? Because it doesn't really. I mean, nobody's going to remember what Brandon Beane said yesterday in April or May, or nobody's going to. It doesn't. It's almost it's like dealing with a politician, right? You're almost assuming that they're not telling you the truth.
Yeah, and sometimes they'll say things, and we kind of knew that, all right, they're just throwing people off the scent there, and that's fine. As long as we trust that what he's telling us he wants us to focus on, we're going to focus on, then we're not going to be too concerned about. And there were only a few people that would talk to the press. It would be the head coach and the GM. The team was, Scott Burstall was on with us, and he talked about how, the team wants to keep their messaging consistent, which means as tight as possible. So not too many people beyond. Did you ever
have an interview?
I had I had some low-level football business media things.
Okay.
But no, there was never like an interview where I was interviewed about what they would ask me what they thought our team was going to do.
Right.
No one in my.
It's kind of funny, like, it's kind of funny how few people know who you are.
Yeah.
After. Part of that is you, and like I said in my win at 4, I find you sometimes humble to a fault, but it's a compliment. But you were the director of football administration for the Buffalo Bills, living in Buffalo, New York, for 15 years. Like there are much. People know who snowplowed out Josh Allen, that guy Squirrel. like they know who that dude is. Right. And I would venture to guess, maybe a little bit before our podcast, were you ever recognized outside of One Bills Drive for your role?
A few times, but
by name or by face or what?
Mostly by a few times by, hey, you work for Bill. Most of it was they might have seen you in the media guide or something. The real fans that really study that kind of stuff for the yearbook. But no, by design, I was never, hardly ever really in TV cameras. I wasn't on the sideline during the game. I was up in the press box in a booth with officials, and in an
indirect way that probably also helped your longevity. Right, because you can go too close to the sun in the NFL.
Yeah,
right. I kind of found that out myself. You can fly a little too close to the sun, and you can become a little higher profile, which raises your visibility and maybe the upside, but also exposes you to more of the whims of the people who are making the decisions.
Well, and I think, and again, this is fine. Brandon Beane knew, he went through the ranks there with the Panthers, Carolina Panthers. He had a real good understanding of what people did and what a director of football administration did. Like Rex Ryan came in and he's like, director of football, what do you do? Like,
does every team have a director of football administration?
Yeah, it's pretty common.
Or it's called something.
There's football administration and there's football operations. So
what's the difference?
So my decision making and execution was more at trying to help the football side of the organization with basically anything related to money.
Okay.
For the most part, that's overly simplistic.
And maybe for people who haven't heard us very often or whatever, when we talk about like the football side of the operation, there are really two distinct sides of an NFL team, right? And two, right? It's the non-football, which is everything else: marketing, tickets, all of
stadium operations,
everything not between the white lines. And then that's probably, I don't know, what, 50% of the staff, maybe a little less.
If you
now
count coaches and scouts are in football.
Yeah. So the non-football side would be probably less than half now, right? Because okay.
Yeah.
And then the football side of it is pretty clearly delineated from the non-football side of it.
Yeah.
So you were in charge. So then there's football administration and there's football operations.
Yeah.
So what does the football operations department do?
Operations guys they handle team travel. They fly players back and forth. They don't deal a lot with the coaches. I dealt more with the coaches.
Thankless.
Yeah. So
coach is more difficult to deal with than players. Like logistically, like for the non-football part of the job, who were easier, players or coaches?
I would say coaches because they the dealing with them wasn't as time sensitive. A lot of it was in the off season. Like for an football operations guy, it's possible that on a Sunday night after the player gets injured, they're going to say, this is the next guy on the board. He's a free agent. Get him here by 9:00 tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Make the flight, have him here, pick him up, take him, have his physical, come here, and they would have workouts all the time for bring 3 or 4 DBs just to run them and see.
So that's the football operations guys.
Yeah.
So football administration, you were basically in charge or helped be in charge of all of the money decisions, all of the
decisions, execution,
staff decisions, right? Like lower than the coach level.
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah. They don't box in each one to say you don't bleed over into the other. We work together in well in concert, but it's like the operations. I had my own office, and it was near the video guys. It was near scouts. It was near Mr. Wilson for a while, which is just when we moved into the new building. But like the operations guys are in the scouting room.
Yeah,
their desks are in the scouting office.
That was when I was there. That was Dennis Abraham and Big D, and the
Mike Beal.
Yes, St. Louis Cardinal fan. I always remember that about him. Funny enough,
that's right. They both went to the Chargers with John.
Butler. And their job was interesting, and it was pressure. It was pressure packed. Like those were tough jobs.
Those were football operations guys, and you're exactly right.
Yeah, that was a tough job because all shit flows downhill, right? Yeah. And they were given the task of getting guys in.
Yep.
And I remember I remember I'd go in there. The waiver wire would be 4:00 every day.
4:00,
I think, and at like 3:58, they were at their computer because they had to print it out and get it. I think it was to AJ Smith at 4:00:01.
Yep.
So that just in case somebody popped on there or whatever, like their job was much more time sensitive than my job was.
Yep, and mine. Yeah. In coaching and
but it looked like
administration.
Fun.
Oh yeah,
it looked like fun. Like listen, I wouldn't have disliked that job.
You're really in the action.
Yes, you are. You are all the moving parts. They know who's in, who's coming, who's going. Like, yeah, they were involved in meetings where you might not think at their level of importance they'd be involved in, but they were the ones who were going to have to execute what Mr. Butler or John Butler or AJ Smith wanted. So they were in the meetings.
Yep.
I saw them run out of meetings, like physically run out of a meeting to go, book a flight or make a phone call or whatever. It always struck me as an interesting job.
Yeah, they're part of all the personnel meetings, and I was in some of them, and depending on who the head coach was. But they had, when I was there with Sean McDermott for 4 months. There was I was in a few meetings, but there was some that I was not in. They were having a personnel meeting with, GM. I don't even know if Brandon Bean was there, but I think Sean was running the meeting with all the coaches. And this is a meeting I was in with other regimes. We'll talk about kind of how that works, how territorial position coaches are about players that they want, but there's only so much of a pie for the salary cap. I got some stories about that, but my printer, they wanted all of us to send stuff to the same printer. My printer was in that room.
Oh.
And no one told me that they were having this meeting. So apparently I heard that there was like a real heavy conversation going on with like Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott.
God.
And like they were contemplating, all of a sudden the printer went off real loud. It was me.
And
it's also one of the scouts came and he said, oh man, Sean wants to see you in the meeting. I'm like, okay. And so all the scouts are around the outside. As you get closer to the middle, it was, Sean McDermott, and he had an empty chair next to him. He's like, Don, have a seat. I go in, and he's like, hey, we're trying to have this meeting, and the printer went off. I heard it was you. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't realize this meeting was going on. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I didn't know Sean that well.
Right.
And he's like, it's all right, don't worry about it. And he
So
just send it to a different printer. I'm like, oh, thank you.
That's not the reason you got. That's not the reason you got let go.
No, he laughed. Apparently, he was still laughing about it afterwards. Did you see his face? You see how?
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
What were your impressions of him? I mean, I know you know him a little bit,
yeah.
but like maybe, and especially like this week, he took some heat. He took some heat Sunday,
Yeah.
For some of the decisions and whatever else. But before we go here, what did you get from him from the 4 months you've known him? And I know you've had some interactions with him since.
I have, and so first of all, when I got let go, he was not part of the decision. He did reach out after that, and sent me a text and said, hey, I just want you to know I appreciate what you did for me and for all the coaches moving in. And I know you're going to have whatever you decide to do, you're going to have a great, rest of your career. And now he didn't have to do that, and he did. And then over the summer that year, I'm still being paid. I can say that now. I wasn't allowed to for a while.
Oh, wow. Okay.
for a while. But I was working on some things outside. It was September, and I knew his assistant, Matt Warswick, real well. You see, Matt has an office that's literally adjacent, like almost in Sean McDermott's office. He brought him over from the Panthers.
Okay.
I'm trying to think who he would have been like when you were there.
Debbie Driscoll.
Yeah, it would have been like Debbie Driscoll. And on the sideline, you see Matt right next to Sean with clipboard. And I mean, he's this guy. So it was a Saturday before the home opener, his first home opener in 2017. And I called Matt and I said, Matt, do me a favor. First of all, I'm excited for you. You're about to, have your first NFL game in this position. And, but could you throw me into Sean's voicemail?
Okay.
I said, I don't want to take a second away from what he's doing now. I don't know when he's going to get the voicemail, but just put me in his voicemail. He goes, oh, absolutely. No problem. Here you go. Boom. And Sean McDermott's voicemail. And I just said, hey, Sean, Don Purdy, I just want to say, I hope that when you run out of that tunnel tomorrow for the first time as a head coach, that it's everything you've ever dreamed it would be.
Yep.
And I said, I know just from knowing you these past few months that, you're going to have a great career. And
that's a nice.
Well, no, I meant to, and what's even nicer is that a couple days later after the game, I think the team won, and I was outside, my phone rang, and it was one of those 716-648 numbers.
648-1800.
Yeah, but I was like, wait a minute, this is a One Bills Drive number, but it's not a cell phone.
Yeah, I sadly I was waiting for that phone to ring about 23 years ago. Right about it, we're going to celebrate the anniversary on February 9th. We're going to have a show on February 9th to celebrate the anniversary. Anyway, sorry, 648-1800. I know. Go ahead.
But it was a different number, 648, so I knew it was from inside that building, but it was not and I had his cell phone, but it wasn't that. And he's, Don, I just want you to know, your voicemail message meant a lot to me. And he goes, thank you. And again, I know you're going to be doing well. He didn't have to call me.
Sure.
He
Absolutely
didn't have
not.
to.
No,
And
of course
then
not.
he texted me once or twice, a few times after on my birthday. And
that's cool.
Maybe another time.
He seems like
he's a great guy.
Genuinely good man.
And not just because of that, but I do believe from watching how he handled the DeMar Hamlin situation, and so unprecedented. Again, we keep using that word, but he's so the right guy for this team, and that's what kind of hurts, is watching him knowing that they expected to be more, and this they're going to be right. They're going to be right there in the mix next year. I think it's going to be, where are the Chiefs and the Bengals and the Bills going to play each other?
Yeah,
and that's what's hard, because as great as the regular season is, man, every fan knows now that it's still when these are the expectations, it's what happens in those games that really matters, how far you advance.
So interesting little comparison before we go. So I read on Twitter something that Mike Harrington of the Buffalo News said, and I hadn't thought of it, and it totally clicked. We did the whole comparison to 1990, and we're going to move away from that now, going forward, and we're going to, open it up to basically Bills players, coaches, staff from any era to talk to. And obviously the 1990 comparison didn't ring completely true, but it was still valid. He compared last year's and this year's teams to the 2005, 2006, and then 2006, 2007 Sabres.
I'm going to say the Bills.
Really interesting comparison. Where the 05-06 Sabres were on this great run. They should have won the Cup. I don't know if you remember, but they ended up playing Carolina in the Eastern Conference Finals.
You were there, right? You went to one of the games?
Yeah, I was at Game 6. It was
Get some wine and cheese?
No, it was in Buffalo.
It was Buffalo, sorry.
They had the most ridiculous run of defenseman injuries like in NHL history. They were down 4 defensemen in Game 7. Wow. They lost the game 3-2. Carolina ended up winning the Super Bowl, or the Stanley Cup, and the Sabres would have beaten the Oilers team that were in the finals. And I shed a tear after that Game 7 because it was such a fun ride. It felt like 13 seconds. You felt like you were the better team in that series, and you didn't win for whatever circumstances. They come back in 06-07. It's their year. They were the favorites in Vegas. They ended up winning the President's Trophy for the best record in the regular season. But the regular season was joyless because you expected them to win every game, and it meant nothing. The regular season, the success in the regular season meant nothing.
Right.
They got through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, but it was harder than expected. And then they just kind of collapsed against Ottawa. And they lost a couple of overtime games, and they lost in 5. And then famously, they let Chris Drury and Danny Briere leave
on the same day, right?
It's July 1st, 2007. And that was basically the end of the franchise for they haven't won a playoff series since. And that's not going to happen with the Bills.
Right.
17 is still in the building, of course, so you're fine. But that 2-year run, it felt like by the end of 07 or the end of the 07 run, they just, and you could see it, even though they were really successful, there were obvious cracks and there were obvious things that their talent was able to kind of overcome during the season and the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. But when it ended, you were like, when
those 2 guys left too. That window closed.
That window closed. Yeah. So the Bills' window is not closed by any means.
No, not at all.
But the 2-year run of last year and this year really did parallel those 2 Sabres runs, because you feel like last year you just left it all on the table.
Should have.
And then you run it back this year, and you just can't get back there. It's hard.
And the fans are smart, and they understand, and their expectations have changed to where it is in these playoffs that they expect and need the team to win. Getting there is so 2017, 2019, right?
Yep.
Not.
Before we go, we do have to spin the wheel of failed Bills coaches. And the wheel here stumped me. We went obscure today. Of all the coaches that would be on the wheel, I had to ask the wheel who this coach was, because I am unfamiliar with the name or anything else. So we are going to go with Stan Hixson.
Stan Hixson was a very soft-spoken receivers coach that I think could have he could have played Morgan Freeman at a Halloween party.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Just out of that, like Leslie Frazier type.
Kind of like that. Yeah. Just real. But and it was hard for me to picture him, with receivers that are prima donnas, right?
Sure. Yeah. Jerry
And,
Butler. Very soft spoken.
Yeah. Jerry had a little more juice to him, where you can imagine Jerry getting all riled up. You just could not imagine a Stan Hixson in a meeting room, getting in the guy's face, being like, "Oh, you ever do that again? Have you ever missed that block again?" But he must have done it because he was in the league with other teams, and but I don't have a soundbite for him. Thankfully, I don't recall him getting in a car crash ever,
or
car accident.
So I think he was only here 1 year.
Was it just 1 year?
I would have said. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but no, it's tough. Maybe 2 years.
2 years. It was probably 2, not 3.
Sure,
but it was probably 2.
Sure.
If I had to guess, that there were so many.
That was the average again, right? And then go for it. It's just unremarkable. But there are hundreds of those guys in the NFL, right? That you don't know, that you wouldn't know his name, but they're, integral to the team success and have had nice careers in the NFL, even though you don't know who they are.
Well, and they talk about players who have been, bouncing around from a team here. Maybe they're on their third team, and they get labeled as journeymen.
Yeah,
man, coaches are journeymen.
Yes.
You know it.
Some of those guys, they were on their 8th, 9th team.
Yeah,
and not necessarily just the NFL. We're talking college teams and high school teams, and the journey of most of those guys to get to where they got is lifelong.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not necessarily all that glamorous. Some of the stops that they've had to make, unless you're like the former player route or, real high profile and just go all the way to the top. A guy like Stan Hixson probably took 20 years to get there.
I don't know if it took that long. It might have, but I would imagine it would take somewhat less. And the former player route is interesting because I remember when Rex brought in Ed Reed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was the first person to take him to, I picked him up, took him to his apartment. I got him all set up. It was all foreign to him. He never coached.
Sure.
But what was also foreign to Ed Reed was how the hours. He couldn't believe it. Now, he is known, like Peyton Manning calls Ed Reed one of the smartest players he's ever played against because of obviously how much he studied film.
Yeah. And
he could anticipate seeing something and knowing, and my gosh, what a career. But he was open to me about, man, I just can't believe.
Yeah.
And he felt bad leaving early. He was there, 6, 7 in the morning and there till late at night, but he wasn't the DB coach. I think he might have been like safeties and special assistant to the DB coach or something. Still like Ed Reed, but he was not digging it.
No,
he hated the hours.
It is a commitment.
Yep.
That changes your life, and you have to be. It is your first commitment. More so, people can talk about family first, blah blah blah. I saw a lot of not family first in a lot of different ways. When it comes to that, not just not just the nefarious stuff, but just the. You're never home. You're never home. You're if you have kids, you don't see them often. The decisions you have to make, to further yourself in that career are I don't know if I could have done it for 20 years. I think you're either a lifer or you get like Ed Reed. You look at this and you're like, oh my God, like this is crazy.
It is. And I think one of our first interviews, one that we're going to play is before we were on Cover One, was Pete Metzelar's. And I was so happy for him because he coached, if he could have scripted it, had a very good playing career as the Bills' all-time leading tight end, catches games, all that. But he coached for a few years, including with the Bills for a couple of years. But then he won that Super Bowl with the Colts. And he said it meant a lot to him, a lot. I was surprised but happy for him. But then he kind of hung it up and he went and he's coaching high school and enjoying his life. So, it wasn't his whole life, but it sort of found that sweet spot.
No,
career.
Scratch the itch that he didn't get.
Yeah, and he has a ring, right? And
no, that's perfect. That's kind of perfect because if you give your life to coaching, it'll take it all.
Woo.
It'll take it all. And even in the offseason, it's not going to get much better for these guys for a while. Like they're going to grind out all the draft and the scouting stuff, and they just switch hats, but they don't switch hours. Yeah. It won't be till 9 o'clock every night, but it'll be till like 6.
Well, and the it's not an all or nothing proposition for coaches. I mean, if you're even on a successful team, but if your unit, if your linebackers or your D line underperforms, you're on the chopping block.
There'll be a few staff changes this year, I'm sure.
And in an episode coming up, we're going to talk about when the players get their opportunity to try to pitch for free agents around the league at their position. It gets competitive and territorial and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And when they're told they can't get their guy because the GM decided, after hearing everybody make their case for how this guy can help our unit, and they put their money toward these other couple positions, it's like they're not happy. And then maybe they get told, we'll talk about it, but there's still a draft coming up, but
Yeah. One quick one, and then we'll let everybody go here. Was there a time you remember where there was a coach let go from a staff, but not the entire staff? Is that more uncomfortable? Because that's being singled out. It's one thing if the head coach gets let go, then you basically are assuming that you're going to be let go as well. Like you're that's the assumption. You might be able to hang on, but that's the assumption.
You hope to interview.
If you were hired by a head coach and brought on his staff, and he lets just you go, that's an indictment of your work specifically.
It is. You're a sacrificial lamb, or at least you might view yourself that way if you thought you were justified in staying. But otherwise, it's a black mark. It and it happens.
Yeah,
that definitely.
Do you happens. Have maybe without naming a name? Do you have a memory of like one time where it got kind of uncomfortable with a guy who maybe wasn't expecting to be let go? Well, some of these guys know.
We talked about Greg Roman that first year.
As
coordinator.
Wasn't Turk let go
too?
Like week 2 or whatever?
Yeah, after one game.
Yeah,
I think it was one game, or was it 2? It was like week something like that. It was barely.
And he couldn't have possibly been expecting.
He
that.
was not. He was. I heard he was furious. Yeah.
Because that's embarrassing.
It is. Like you said, you're singled out. Like if the whole coaching staff goes let go and you're part, that's kind of what happened to me. The whole scouting staff, all the football personnel, almost all of it got let go as part of that wave. It
would have hurt more if it was just you.
Yeah. But I understood there was a new regime coming in, and they had people that they'd work with, and look, hey, they've been doing great. But so that made it easier for me, even just to tell your family.
Yes.
Like it wasn't my performance.
Right. No, you were pushed out in a wave of guys.
Yeah.
It makes logical sense to everybody that you.
And that happened to you.
Yes.
Sorry to keep reminding you. February 9th looms here.
February 9th, 2001. Yes.
We only drink water on the show, but February 9th.
I don't know what day of the week February 9th is. I'm going to look before we let everybody go. February 9th. And you know what? That day, I think what I'm going to do, if we have a show, February 9th is perfect. It's a Thursday.
Okay.
So it's 2 weeks from tomorrow. I think what I'll do on that day is maybe walk everybody through my day on February 9th, 2001, because I absolutely 100% did not see it coming.
I know. And I wish I could have. I didn't expect. I don't know what I thought was coming.
I didn't see, because it was the day that Greg Williams was coming into town. He had been hired the week before, and he came into town that day. So, again, it'll be reason
to let you go. They should have talked to you, and you could, whatever.
Something
happened. Yeah. Mine's May 30th, 2017. I don't know what day that is.
All right, let's look. Hopefully that's not Memorial Day. Maybe we could do that like from the backyard of the pool. Oh, it's a Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday. All right.
So, and it'll be 6 years, 5 years, 6 years. 2017 or 18?
It'll be 6 years.
6 years. So we can have a 6-year anniversary and a 22-year anniversary on those days.
All right.
Well, this was fun. We have a lot more coming up. We're planning to interview Phil Hansen later on in the week that we'll release. And then, we'll be back next week with a bunch of new stuff. And we're going to pivot towards the offseason and kind of what goes on in a front office. And I find this stuff kind of fascinating and stuff that people don't really know.
Very true.
All right.
Very true.
See you then.
Forward to it. All right.
Fellas, listen up. All you ever did for an opportunity. You got to take it. Where else would you rather be than right here, right now?
I want to bid you now farewell, but not goodbye.
Thank you very much, Ralph. Today is a bittersweet day for me. Memories, many of which Mr. Wilson has alluded to, flood my mind right now. I'm surrounded by my thoughts, and indeed by the presence of friends unparalleled. Visions from a lifetime of thrills keep flashing before me, and yet the future beckons, and I look forward to it with excitement and anticipation. Because I'll tell you something, I'm a Buffalo Bills fan. So I advanced it on that. And we finally came to an agreement and decided to move forward. And so now my time with the Buffalo Bills, in my opinion, has come to its natural conclusion. How do I begin to thank all those who have been instrumental in enriching my life here? Well, I can't do it adequately, and I know it. I can't adequately. But I remember you all fondly and forever.
North Fox, so it's an early day. Be sure you get your taping and breakfast in. The meeting tomorrow for all players will be an 8 a.m. meeting. Enjoy your day today, fellas.
It's great because it was a special group of people at a special time in the city. The team that we had really unified the region. And there are still people who think fondly of those things and remember some significant things that happened during that time that were pretty cool.
You see, our fans are great. You know, they come out, they get excited, they come out and they cheer before the game. They're ready to go. And when you see that, when you walk out of that tunnel, you know, right now, here comes the electricity.